Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Ivan Blasquez here. We're going to be discussing a new carbohydrate metric that distinguishes between good and bad carbs. In this case, starches. Okay, good versus bad starches. So essentially, it's the Amylopectin ratio. So typically, foods that have higher amylose content are the slower burning carbs, and their molecular structure is a straight chain structure. Amylose is a type of resistant starch and it's not easily degraded. Then you have high amylopectin foods, which typically these are faster carbs and they have a branch chain structure and makes them easily degraded. So let's just dive right in. So the prime example here is rice tends to be low amylose and beans tend to be higher amylose, which kind of parallels with their glycemic response. You're going to have a lower glycemic index with beans versus a higher glycemic index with rice. Now, what are some of the vice rices out there? Well, white and brown. I say white because it's basically low amylose and it's stripped of its fiber and bran and nutrients. Then you have brown rice, which has to do with the arsenic caveat, which Dr. Greger talked about in his videos. Typically, rice is low amylose, which makes it more palatable, actually, which might explain the high preference for eating rice. In fact, studies have shown that this actually can lead to weight gain, and this preference for rice tends to be that we have these taste receptors that discriminate between the types of starches. So we actually have a preference. There may be a preference for the branch chain starch versus the unbranched chain starch. Now, what are my nice rice exceptions? Well, brown rice that's arsenic free, so a brand that's arsenic free, and then sprouted or germinated. It's been shown, studies have shown that sprouted brown rice actually has a lower glycemic response than just regular brown rice. And then my second top rice is black rice. Now here's the catch. Black rice is low amylose, so you would think that it would be highly degradable. It actually has high antioxidants. In fact, it's the highest antioxidant rice. Antioxidants have been shown to slow down the glycemic response. This is another angle to this carbohydrate metric. Now, bananas and potatoes have been a little mixed. Some sources say potatoes and bananas are higher in amylose, and that's actually true in bananas, but that actually may depend on the state of ripeness. Most people don't eat green bananas, so we may not be getting as much amylose by eating a ripe yellow banana. So there's been some interesting research that has shown that low amylase levels, this is the enzyme that actually degrades amylose, low amylase levels have been found to be associated with obesity, metabolic syndrome, in particular insulin resistance, and, like my recent video, fatty liver, having fatty liver. And this actually has to do with insufficient insulin release. In other words, we hear keto and paleo talk about low insulin levels and health benefits. Yeah, that's true. But when your insulin levels are too low, then you become glucose intolerant. You're not producing enough insulin to sweep away the glucose into the cells to do its job. And we also have a gut microbiome issue, which a study has elegantly shown that when the gut microbiome isn't colonized to carbohydrates, we have aberrant glycemic responses as well as bloating and all those other kinds of caveats that come with carbohydrate consumption. It's a gut microbiome issue, as I've mentioned in previous videos. Now, there's some studies that show there's a genetic predisposition to having lower copies of this gene that, the amylase that breaks down amylose. Well, what these studies also don't mention is that amylase levels can actually be improved. There's been studies to show that when we exercise, we actually increase our salivary amylase levels, and fitness level is associated with that as well. And this has been studied in the rodent model. It needs to be studied in humans at some point. But essentially, when carbohydrate intake is reduced, amylase levels are also reduced. So that's really fascinating stuff. Having higher levels of amylase, the enzyme that breaks down amylose, has actually been shown to be associated with better health and better metabolism of carbohydrates and being leaner. So if we don't use it, we lose it. So that means if we cut the carbs out, we lose the ability to process them. I've been mentioning this in my videos. Now, I've seen some videos talking about low amylose diets. Guess what? These diets are very similar to Atkins and paleo. They are elimination diets that are carb-based, so eliminating some carbohydrate source. Well, these diets are hot off the start. Why? Well, initially, a lot of these diets are predicated on an imbalanced gut microbiome. So if we have an inability to process carbohydrates, eliminating the carbohydrate will acutely, lead to some results. But as I've mentioned before, better isn't optimal. We can go from worst to worse. See, that's relative. That's improvement, but it's relative. People who go from worst to a little worse, or just worse, don't know what it's like to go from good to great. See, there's a difference. It's a scale and a spectrum. So bringing it all together, guys, my top 3 carb smart strategies. Number 1, I've talked about the starch to fiber ratio. And then there's a nutrient density ratio, which is obviously highlighted by black rice being low amylose. But the fact that black rice is high nutrient density gives it the polyphenol advantage. And lastly, this amylose amylopectin ratio, beans are at the top of the list. And if one were to want to consume rice, I would prefer the sprouted brown rice that's arsenic free, or black rice, or for breads, flourless whole grain sprouted breads. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up, and tune in next time.